So Stephen and I presented this at NI Week this year. This presentation is going to have quite a bit of a different feel than Stephen's presentation just did. Stephen's presentation was very cerebral. Anytime we talk about channels, my brain starts to hurt. This is very nuts and bolts. So we are going to talk about how you guys can effectively write your own features in the LabVIEW editor based on some awesome new features we have in LabVIEW 2015. Before I get started, though, if you need to leave early, then you really don't need to stick around because everything I'm about to say is at this link right here. So if you just write that down, you'll have access to everything that's in the slides and all the demos that I'm going to show as well. So ni.com/lvmenus is where you're going to go to get all of this stuff. If you didn't write it down just then, don't worry, I show it again at the end. All right, so here's all the stuff that I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to give a quick little sort of review of things that you can do in LabVIEW 2014 and previous to augment the LabVIEW editor, basically add your own features. And when I say add your own features, I'm referring to as a LabVIEW developer, as a G programmer. I've never written a line of C++ code in my life. I only know LabVIEW. So when I add features to LabVIEW, it's with LabVIEW. And everything in this presentation is going to talk about how you can add features to LabVIEW with LabVIEW. In 2015, we added this feature to allow you to customize the right-click menus in the editor. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. My first demo, we're going to build a basic plugin from scratch, sort of. I cheat a little bit. Then we're going to talk about the plugins that ship with LabVIEW. So this framework is so cool, we actually used it to add 7 new right-click entries in the right-click menus in LabVIEW 2015. We also have an awesome community for this feature. LabVIEw 2015 came out a little over 3 months ago, and we already have 46 community downloads for plugins for this feature. So people are buying in, people are adding their own features, putting them up online. I'm going to talk about some of my favorites of that. I'm going to talk briefly about some tools that we have both, mainly in LabVIEW itself, to help you write these things. Stephen's around to help answer any questions that come up on the decisions behind the design section because he actually came up with the framework that we plug into with our G code. And then just a few caveats toward the end. So in LabVIEW 2014 and previous, there were already a few ways that you could plug into the editor itself with your own G code. One of the most common is writing your own VIs to plug into the pull-down menus in LabVIEW. I'm not going to talk about how to do this in this presentation. You can ask me later if you want, but you can actually write VIs that will put entries in your file pull-down, your tools pull-down, and your help pull-down menus in the LabVIEW editor. So that's already there. Another thing we have, I'm the quick drop guy in case you didn't know. And in Quick Drop, you can add plugins that allow you to press a control key combination to do some cool editor feature while the Quick Drop window's up. So that's already there too. And then project providers. If you've never heard that term before, that's basically a way to have G code that provides right-click menus in the project window. Some examples of that, if you guys have ever used the built-in source code control in the project window to check out files and that kind of stuff, that's all G code behind the scenes. The thing is that writing a project provider is not easy and it's not straightforward, so much so that you actually need to talk to the LabVIEW Tools Network team here at NI if you want to add a project provider. But these are basically the ways you can augment the editor in 2014 and previous. But in 2015, we now have a framework that allows us to write G code plug into the right-click menus in the editor itself. So when you right-click on a control or something on the diagram or whatever, and you have your standard right-click menu, you can write G code to stick stuff in there as well. What this feature allows is augmenting the edit time right-click menus on the panel and on the diagram. It also allows you to augment the right-click menus on the block diagram at runtime. So when your VI is running, you can right-click on the diagram and do things like set a probe or set a breakpoint or things like that. You can actually write G code to plug stuff into those menus as well. This feature does not have anything to do with runtime front panel right-click menus because you've been able to do that for 20 years. That's custom runtime menus. We can already do that. This feature has nothing to do with that. That's more like writing your end-user application and you want to customize the right-click menus that your end-user sees of your running VI. That's already there. I'm not talking about that today. So obviously, from what I've been talking about, you can add new things to the menus, right? But we use the term augmenting because there's a lot more you can do than just add new things to the menus. You can add new pull rights, so add new categories of menus. Stephen didn't show this too much in his previous presentation, but there are a ton of right-click menus having to do with channels, and all of those are implemented with this feature. when you right-click on a type and want to create a new endpoint for writing or reading, there's pull rights in the create pull right that lets you create all those. If you want to replace one endpoint with another type of endpoint, like a tag with a stream or something like that, custom right-click menus with this feature are providing all those menu entries. You can do stuff like mess with the existing entries in the menu, remove stuff, move stuff, disable things, enable, check, uncheck. All that stuff is available with this framework. Yes, question?
I seem to have to go right-click on an array and go to data and then go to delete. Can I pull that up to a high level so I only have to go one step?
So the question was, if there's a very nested right-click menu option and you use it enough that you wish it was in the top-level menu, will this feature allow you to move that? And the answer is yes. I will be demoing some of my favorites of those later in the presentation. My first demo, though, is going to be to build a new right-click plugin completely from scratch. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to add a feature to LabVIEW 2015. And the specific feature I'm going to add is a spell checker. So I'm going to add a feature right now that lets you right-click on a string and discover the misspelled words in that string. That's going to be pretty cool, right? So in a right-click plugin, there are three parts that define a right-click plugin. And I'm going to be writing all of those in my demo. The first one is the affected items type def. All that is that tells the framework what type of objects your plugin is going to work on. If I'm writing a spell checker, it doesn't really make sense for my spell checker to appear in the right-click for a numeric, right? It makes sense for it to appear in the right-click for a string. So that's how I'm going to define that. The builder VI is the VI that runs when you right-click on a thing, in this case it's going to be a string, and determines if it needs to add something to the menu and where to put it. And then the execute VI, that's just the scripting code. If you guys aren't familiar with VI scripting in LabVIEW, it's a way to programmatically mess with a VI. Add things to it, delete things from it, reconfigure things on it. That's what scripting is. And that's where all the scripting code is going to go in the execute VI.
Write VIs.
You can write VIs that write VIs, that's right. But in this case, we're writing a VI that does a spell check. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to open the thing that creates the plugin from a template. So this is a utility that ships with LabVIEW 2015, and this allows you to create sort of the shell of your plugin. Let's call it spell check string. And this is going to create those three parts of the plugin that I just talked about, the affected items, the builder, and the execute. First thing is the affected item. So I need to tell this plugin, what do I want you to act upon? And I want it to act upon strings, right? So we'll make this an array of strings. Okay? Now let's go to the builder VI. So this is the VI that has all the logic in it that determines where to put things in the menus. Your builder VI could stick multiple things in the menus. So I could have spell check string. I could have add spelling mistakes to string. I don't know. I could put whatever things I want in the menu here. This VI is going to let you define those, where they go in the menu. If you need to do any sort of checking of the right-click thing, like is this string set to passwords display, and if it is, I don't want to show my spell checker. I don't know, something like that. You would do all of that here. This VI actually, on its own by itself, I don't need to tweak for this plugin. I'm just going to let it stick the spell checker into the menu, and that's all I want it to do. I don't care where it goes. So I'm actually not going to change this VI at all. The builder is good to go. But now I need to write the scripting code. So the scripting code is going to go in and actually manipulate the VI once the user has picked the right-click option. So this is the code that's going to run once they've right-clicked on the string and picked my spell check string menu option. So I need to write that scripting code real quick. I hope you guys don't mind if I write a VI real fast. And the VI, I'm going so. All right, so the part I said I was going to cheat on, I already wrote this VI that takes in a string and does the spell check. So y'all probably didn't want to watch me actually do this. Interesting fact, in case y'all didn't know, the VI Analyzer Toolkit has a spell check test in it. And I'm just kind of stealing some of the code from that in the spell checker here. So when you guys download this presentation, you download the demo's not going to work if you don't have the VI Analyzer Toolkit installed. So keep that in mind. All right, so.
Shameless plug.
Hey. All right, so now we've got, I think oh yeah, almost. All right, so I'm done, and all I'm doing is I'm taking every string in the right-click menu, in the right-click selection, checking to see if it has any mistakes, seeing if any of those did have mistakes, and if they did, don't fail the transaction. So fail transaction means act like they never picked that right-click menu option. And if they right-clicked on a string and it has no spelling mistakes, well, I'm not going to fix anything, right? So I should act as if they never picked that menu option. That's what the fail transaction output does. So we're actually done. This plugin is ready to go. I just added a feature to LabVIEW. There's one more thing I need to do, and that is to refresh the menus. So I'm going to talk later in the presentation about some utility VIs that ship with this feature. One of them allows you to programmatically refresh the menu system, and what that does is that activates any plugins that you've just added to the system. I could do the same thing by restarting LabVIEW. I don't want to restart LabVIEW. That takes too long. So I'm just going to run. So now the menus have been refreshed. Let's see if that plugin that I just wrote works.
Make that a menu.
All right, so here's a VI. It's got a bunch of strings that have a bunch of spelling mistakes. So now if I right-click on a string, I should see that spell check string menu option that I just wrote. And sure enough, we see it down here at the bottom of the menu. Remember how I didn't customize the builder at all? I could have added code in the builder to put it in a different spot in the menu. If you don't do that, it just sticks it at the bottom. So now if I pick spell check string, and sorry for those of you that are colorblind, but what I did was I changed all the misspelled words in the string to red. And all the plugins in this framework work on multi-select, so I can highlight all of these strings here. We'll see spell check string is also in that right click, and then it'll spell check those strings and turn their misspellings into red as well. I just added a feature to LabVIEW in 5 minutes.
Should fold them.
Is this feature awesome or what? This framework is the best. LabVIEW programmers can now add features into LabVIEW. I'm very excited. Speaking of, we shipped LabVIEW 2015 with 7 of these things, and I've got a demo VI for all of them, but the first one I'm going to talk about is empty list box. I took LabVIEW Basics 1 training in January of 1999 when I became an applications engineer here at National Institute. In one of the lessons, we wrote a VI that had a list box on the front panel. So it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. You can have a list of words and, have it be a number on the diagram. That's neat. So I was playing around with it a little bit. And once I was done playing around with it, I asked my instructor, again, January of 1999, is this guy named Chris. He's a math teacher now. But he was a LabVIEW guy here at NI back then. And I said, hey, how do I clear out this list box? He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I want to get rid of all the lines of text that I just typed in the list box. He's like, oh, well, you can't do that. I was like, what? He's like, oh, well, you could, highlight all of them and press the delete key and delete every single row. I was like, that's stupid. And he's like, oh, wait, here's an idea. Go to the block diagram, drop a property node for the item names, wire an empty array to it, wire the error out, set a breakpoint on that, run the VI, have it pause after that, and that'll empty your thing. Then you can delete that code you just wrote. I was like, seriously? 16 years later, National Instruments still did not have a way to empty a freaking list box on the front panel. So when Steven added this framework for us in LabVIEW 2015 to add our own right-click menu options, this was the first one I wrote, and I wrote it in 5 minutes. I wrote the test plan in another 5 minutes. So that's how great this feature is G developers can go ahead and add these features to LabVIEW that the C++ developers won't add for us because they're too busy doing something else, apparently. So, except for Steven, because he adds
features you might not ever even use.
Steven adds the features we need, or he adds the features that let us add the features, see? All right, so let me go to my demo VI here. Won't find it in there. We'll just come here. All right, so this demo VI demonstrates the 7 plugins that ship with LabVIEW 2015. These don't require any downloads or anything. And here it is. Right-click on a list box, and what do you know? Delete all rows is now in the list, and it deletes all the rows in the list box. Is that so hard? What's really insulting is that when we added the LabVIEW tree control in LabVIEW 7.0, it had a delete all rows. The list box still didn't have one. So multi-select, it works here too. So this one, change to array or element. Steven wrote this one, and this one was a very highly requested idea on the LabVIEW idea exchange. Right-click on a scalar object and do change to array to turn it into an array of that type. Multi-select also works. Similarly, right-click on an array and choose change to element to turn it into the scalar of that type. And multi-select also works on this as well. Again, these ship with LabVIEW 2015. You have them.
To keep the original label.
What original label?
You lost the original label.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
The label of this guy.
I almost always keep that as the label of the array as well.
Go change it, Charles. Challenge. I got half an hour, Charles. You can't be slowing me down with this kind of stuff. Challenge. Hello, Charles. Works on the diagram as well. And by the way, Charles, if you do change it and send it to me, I can probably add it to 4 lines. So works on the block diagram as well. All right, here's another one that was on the Idea Exchange, transpose 2D array. This is an example of one where we actually stuck a new item in one of the submenus of LabVIEW. So if we right-click on the array and go to Data Operations, we now see that there's this new transpose array option in the right-click. And when I pick it, it'll transpose the 2D array.
Oh, yeah.
Also works on the block diagram as well. Let's see. Next one is Explore Sub-VI. I don't know if you guys know Bob Priest. He works alongside me in LabVIEW R&D. He wrote this plugin. Right-click on a sub-VI, and you now have an Explore menu option that will open a Windows Explorer window to where that VI is on disk. If the VI happens to be in an LLB like this one, it will open Windows Explorer to where the LLB is on disk. And then, so if you guys like quick drops like I do, the Control Space Control R shortcut is one of the most popular ones out there. It lets you delete an object but preserve the pass-through wires of that object. I've demoed it 1,000,000 times. Hopefully you guys have seen me talk about it. We took that scripting code and basically stuck it in a right-click menu option in 2015. So if you right-click on an object, you now have remove and rewire as an option. And it does exactly the same thing that the quick drop one does. It also works for multi-select as well. So just like Control Space Control R in quick drop, if you're familiar with that. This one, surprisingly, is the one that I have used the most in the past 3 months since LabVIEW 2015 has released.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't have thought I would. I wouldn't have predicted it. But if you right-click on an array and do size to widest element, it'll find the thing in the array that's the biggest and make the array that big. Particularly useful on enums. I don't know why LabVIEW doesn't do this by default, but again, we can write the G code to make it do it by default.
Does that work on the entire array or just the displayed element?
The entire array. And I think there's one more. Yeah, so this is another quick drop transplant. So people like Control Space Control D in quick drop. That's the one where you pick an object and it goes and creates all the controls and indicators on that object.
Oops,
And it does actually, because check it out. Create all controls and indicators is now an option on an object. Similarly, create all constants. So here I'll do create all constants, and it makes constants off of the unwired input. So these were examples of quick drop ones. And the cool thing is, I didn't have to write any new scripting code for this. A lot of times scripting code is the most tedious part of these things. And I already had the scripting code to do this in the quick drop plugin. I just found a way to sort of shimmy that same code into the right-click menu framework so it can show up in the right-click menu.
It's not hard. I did my method viewer a while ago, and it's been sitting. I need to publish it.
Yeah, you should.
Where you can right-click on a dynamic dispatch method, and it
Stop bragging about it. Document it.
All right. I will make a note. And I will get that published sometime soon, before the end of the year.
All right, any questions about those 7 shipping plugins before I move on in the demos? Again.
About the underlying code, the object reference, if I have a combo box, does that count as a string as well?
Yeah, so the question is, how does the whole VI server object hierarchy relate into this? And the answer is yes. If you pick a parent class as your object, like string, for example, any objects in VI server that inherit from that, like combo box, will also have the right-click menu populated.
If you're determining, like, on runtime what to include as a menu, just slow down.
I have some slides later on that talk about performance considerations and concerns. The answer is this thing is really, really fast and really, really efficient.
And it is entirely possible, and I know this from writing project providers, it is entirely possible to write code that plugs into one of these things that will just make you want to claw your hair out.
That's true. Like if you write bad scripting code, then you'll screw up the whole thing. Yes, but if you have good plugins on your system, then the performance is really outstanding.
And sometimes it's not
It's
immediately
not
obvious.
runtime at all, correct?
That's time.
Don't in the development environment.
Yeah.
Unless,
when you right-click.
except for the ones on the block diagram.
You can put something in.
Hold on, parallel conversation. What?
You can put something inside your scripting code that gets called by any one of these things that call scripting code in LabVIEW, and you can drive your IDE with these.
Yes.
That's you. That's not the.
Try not to do that.
Try not to do that.
Charles, you can have plugins that affect the runtime menus on the block diagram. I'm actually going to demo one here in a minute.
Runtime doesn't.
When your VI is running, and you can, what? Oh, a built app. Yeah, this has nothing to do with built EXEs. Okay, I think I misunderstood the question. All right. Yeah, nothing to do with built EXEs. All right. So as I mentioned before, we have a community site, ni.com/lvmenus. I'll put the link up again at the end. And so far in the past 3 months, we've had 46 plugins uploaded to the page. Admittedly, many of them are mine and Steven's, but there are also some from outside of NI as well. I have a couple dozen installed on my computer right now. I didn't have the time to demo a couple dozen, but these 5 right here are some of my favorites, and I'm going to demo those for you guys right now. It is really weird programming LabVIEW standing up. Let me just say that. All right, so this one is a popular one on the ID Exchange. It's one that I've wanted. I write a lot of code for picture controls a lot of the time. There's lots of UIs I've worked on that have picture controls. You deal with colors a lot with picture controls. And a lot of times LabVIEW gives you a U32 when you really wanted a color box. You know what I mean? And sometimes vice versa when you're trying to split out parts of it, split out numbers. And this is a plugin that will basically do conversion between those two things. So here I have a color box control on my front panel, and if I right-click, we see replace with U32 numeric is one of my right-click options. And when I pick that, it turns it into a numeric that's U32 and shows the radix and sets it to hex and sets a width of 6 characters, which is exactly what you want to see when you're dealing with a color as a hex value. Similarly, if you right-click on any U32, you'll see replace with color box as one of the options, and that'll let you turn it into a color box. That's particularly handy on the block diagram because there's a lot of properties in VI Server that are colors, but when you do create constant, it gives you a U32 instead of a color box, which is annoying. So here I have a color box. I can right-click on it and make it a constant. Here I have a constant. I can right-click on it and make it a color box. The right-click menu only shows up on U32 numerics. So if you were to right-click on a double, you wouldn't see it. If you were to right-click on an I32, you wouldn't see it. And then it works on multi-select as well. Steven and I really wanted to ship this one with 2015, but people got in our way. So, although said people are not in the LabVIEW R&D organization anymore, so 2016 maybe?
Did you have somebody remove technical objections?
Darren and I would never.
Nope. All right.
Oh, that's what he is for.
I wrote the Create Event plugin, and I'm really proud of it, and I really wanted to ship with 2016, and maybe y'all will too once you see it. So if you right-click on a control and go to the Create Pull Right, there's now an Event Case Pull Right. And this allows you to create a new frame and an event structure on the diagram that is any one of the events that's in the list. So here if I do a value change, for example, it'll find the event structure on the diagram, create the value change for that control, and move its terminal over.
Nice. What if you have more than one?
Yeah.
If you have more than one event structure, then you probably aren't a very good LabVIEW programmer.
Just I work with a lot of other things.
Yes, if you have more than one, please read the documentation on the event structure. You should have that. Yeah, you actually, the menu options don't show up unless it finds a single event structure on the diagram. If the terminal is already wired, then we can see that it will not move the thing. It'll just make the new frame. The list will show all of the menu options, all of the events possible for that particular object. So for example, here I have a tree, and in a tree, you also have things for editing cells, item open, item close. Those all show up in the list as well. And it'll make the new frame. So it really, what's that? No, only single select right now. Finally, if you right-click on a stop Boolean wired to the stop of a while loop and do a value change, not only will it create the case, but it will also move it into the event structure and wire the wire over, because you know that's what it's supposed to look like anyway, right? So yeah, I really like this plugin. I really hate going to the edit events dialog. I mean, it's an okay dialog, but you still got to do this, and then this, and then this, and then click OK, and this is a lot faster. So would y'all like to see this in 2016?
Yes.
Me too. We'll see what happens.
Is it on?
Send in your beta feedback. ni.com/beta.
All right, so the next two plugins I'm going to show you guys actually don't do any scripting code at all. All they do is mess with the menus. So in LabVIEW 8.6, we added this feature called the Breakpoint Manager. It is right here. When this feature came out, I was like, whoa, cool, a single window where I can manage all the breakpoints in my app. That's awesome. And then I never used it. I have never used this thing in the past 7 years. Maybe that's just old habits, I don't know. But I don't use it, and I'm annoyed because when I right-click on a wire in LabVIEW 8 seconds later, and I want to set a breakpoint, I now have to go to the damn pull right menu to pick set breakpoint. So this plugin that I think Steven wrote is both for edit time and run time on the block diagram. And all it does is it takes the breakpoint things and puts them in the top-level menu. That's all it does. No scripting code, no nothing. That's all it does. So this is an example of something you can do with the framework just to mess with the menus. This next one is also messing with the menus. Around LabVIEW 5 or LabVIEW 6, we used to have create constant, create control, and create indicator as the very first 3 things in the menu. And those were glorious days. And then at some point, 6170, I don't know, we moved them all into a pull right. I would wager to say I do create constant on a block diagram about 100 times a day. Create control and create indicator maybe a dozen times a day. That's like 8 hours of solid LabVIEW programming, not attending meetings. And what I have to do is right-click, create control. Yeah, right-click, create control. It's the worst. Right-click, create indicator. Look how much faster it is when we go back to the LabVIEW 5 days and just do right-click, control, right-click, control, right-click, indicator. So much faster. Indicator. Constant's there too. So that plugin is another one where all I did was I took the things that were in the pull right, which are still there, and just stuck them as the first things in the menu. I can't rename them, unfortunately. One of the limitations we have is that the built-in menu options, like the ones that the LabVIEW C++ code adds to LabVIEW, I can move them around, but I can't change their text. So that's why I would rather they say create constant, create control, create indicator. I can't rename them with the framework the way it is currently now. So nevertheless, this is the one I probably, remember I said the size to widest element was one of my favorites that I use the most often. That's my favorite that ships with LabVIEW. This is probably my favorite that's a download on the community site. I use these 100 times a day. And all they did was move the things up into the top of the menu. Yes, Mark.
Can you create the lines?
So I think, yeah, Stephen, we can add separator lines. Yeah, we can add separator lines. Yeah, so we can, most of what you see here is built in like C++ menu items, but we could have G code that sticks in separators if we want to. In fact, I think a G code plugin is making that separator and that separator, but I'm not sure. All right, what's next? Okay, this one's fun. So how many times do you guys have code that looks like this? You've got a whole bunch of VIs running in parallel, and they all return like a test pass Boolean or something. And then you've got a Boolean that says, hey, all of these passed, or something didn't fail. And so if we look on my front panel and run this VI a few times, we see the result is false, but now we got to figure out which one of those things actually failed, right? So I wrote a plugin on compound arithmetic nodes to probe all inputs. And when it does that, it sticks a probe on all the wires. And then we can look in the probe window and say, oh, here's the false, and double-click on it, and it shows us which VI was the one that failed the test. So kind of a nifty. I don't use it that often, but it's nice when it's there.
Why did you put it just on compound arithmetic?
We talked about this, Stephen.
I know, but why did you decide?
I don't remember, but we talked about it. You're the one that told me to do that. I don't remember why. All right. Any questions about the community ones? So there's a jillion of them on the website. Like I said, 4 dozen now almost. These are some of my favorites. Steven's got an awesome one up there. So you've got a VI up here, and like you dig down 3 or 4 sub-VIs levels deep, and you've got a VI down here. And you're like, oh crap, I need to pass this new value from this top VI down the sub-VI hierarchy into this VI. He's got a wire drill.
Like maybe your new channel?
So you right-click on they do go on the content. Right-click on the new control in this VI and say, start the drill. Then you go down into the sub-VI and say, end the drill, and it goes all down the contains of all those VIs, adding that new input on all of them. So that's another cool one to check out, too.
Another corner case is going to be very useful.
Yes.
3 times a year.
Yeah. Sometimes you break down and say, I'm just going to use a global variable.
Right. No. You know, say, when you need a bullet, only a bullet will do. I mean, you know.
There are many tools at your disposal for writing new plugins in LabVIEW 2015. The best tool you have is the LabVIEW documentation. Stephen and I were very lucky to have an awesome tech writer work on this feature for us for 2015. So let me show you how easy it is. Help, LabVIEW Help, LabVIEW 2015 features, adding custom items to the menus, creating shortcut menu plugins. The first topic in the list, and this is where you start. And it goes through, see, it's talking about the different parts of this plugin like I talked about before. Goes through, we have steps, part 1, 2, and 3 that tell you how to go from nothing to having a plugin. So we have excellent resources in the help for this feature. Let's see, where did PowerPoint go? There it is. I showed you all the plugin creator tool. So you run that tool and it creates the shell for you, the affected items, the builder, and the execute VI. It gives you those and you just start writing code. I talked about the refresh menus VI. So look up all menu entries. That's a good one to talk about real quick. So we have a plugin that ships with LabVIEW, but you have to sort of activate it, so to speak. And it's a good plugin for when you're writing your own plugins and you need to learn more about what the menus look like and what the VI server class hierarchy looks like. So let's say you want to write a plugin that has to do with radio button controls. I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to do something with radio buttons. And you want to put your menu items somewhere specific in the menus. Like maybe you want your menu item to show up under add radio button. You're going to write a new plugin that's like add super awesome radio button. I don't know. But that's where you want it to go and you want it to act on radio buttons. Well, there's some information you need to know. You need to know what type of what class of that object it is when you make your affected items. And you need to know the name of that menu item when you're writing your builder VI. So we have this plugin called Lookup All Shortcut Menu Tags and Types. And when you run that, it gives you basically all that information you need to know. First of all, you can see here the class name of that object. So if you weren't familiar with the VI server class hierarchy, now you know, oh, I just right-clicked on a radio buttons control. That's the class name that I'm going to need my affected items to work on. And what did I say? I wanted the thing to go after add new button. Where to go? Add radio button. Is that what it was? So now I know what the menu tag is for that built-in option, so I can stick my new plugin, my new menu item right underneath that guy. So this is a good tool for sort of learning about how the menus are structured and what the VI server class structure is so that you can write your own plugins. I'm going to talk about some utility sub-VIs and some new properties and methods in scripting. And then another great resource for learning how to write a plugin is to look at the plugins that are already in LabVIEW. For example, if we go look on disk at the ones that ship with LabVIEW 2015, let's open up Transpose 2D Array. So we can see that here's the plugin. So start digging away in the code. Almost every one of these is not password protected. There might have been like one sub-VI that called a private method or something that we had to password protect, but just about all of them are open. So here's the builder VI. Real quick, we look to see if there are any arrays in the affected items list with 2 dimensions, because transpose only makes sense on 2D arrays, right? And if there are, this is where we go figure out, well, let's put it under in the data operations submenu and put it under the empty array item. Unless that's not there, then put it under the delete column item. That's it. That was the code that builds up that menu item that you see in the right click. And then for the scripting code, again, pretty simple. If we're dealing with a 2D array, get its value, do the funny trick of variance where you can turn it into a 2D array of variance, transpose, and then write the value back to the array. So you can dig through the code and basically see, well, this is how scripting code works for this and kind of get an idea when writing your own plugin. All right, so there's some new things in VI Server and VI Scripting that help with plugins. We have undoable value and default value properties now. In fact, we added those specifically for the transpose 2D array one. Because when you write the value property or the default value property, normally in scripting, doing that does not add that as an undoable item on the stack of undo things for the VI. So we had to add these new properties that do that. Moving things around in the Z-plane order, we have new properties for. Disconnect terminal is a method that lets you take a wire, disconnect it from a terminal, but leave the rest of the wire still there. We didn't have a method in scripting for that. Jeff K. actually wrote that method. Now you can right-click on a tunnel and do replace with case selector. That we added that in 2013 or so. We never added it to scripting, but we did in 2015. And then the missing names and paths and dependency names and paths. If you have a reference to a missing sub-VI on a block diagram, you can get the path to where LabVIEW is trying to find the sub-VI but can't find it. Similarly, if you have a reference to a typedef constant, and there's a bunch of nested typedefs in there. Then you can get the names and paths of all of the nested typedefs through the dependencies property. So just a couple new things in VI Server and scripting to help us out. You'll find all of the utility VIs that I talked about in this presentation in resource plugins, pop-up menu support. Remember, you don't have to write that down because you wrote down ni.com/lvmenus at the beginning where you can get this presentation from. I demoed the lookup plugin, and then a few utility VIs that help us do things. Talked about refresh menus, a couple of VIs for figuring out if things are nested inside of other things, and I'll talk about the control terminals one in a couple slides from now. We discuss these tools, we discuss these plugins, we answer questions. Stephen and I are on this forum all the time, ni.com/lvmenus. That's where the community group is, that's where the 46 plugin downloads are, that's where this presentation is, that's where all this cool stuff is. Also, Stephen instituted this voting system on the plugins, so you can give the plugins ratings of like 1 star, 2 star, up to 5 star, and we're going to look at those ratings, hopefully at some point, and basically use the ratings that people have given the plugins to give us an idea of which ones people would most like to see added to LabVIEW proper instead of being separate downloads. All right, we use LLBs for our plugins. LLBs are awesome. Anybody that tells you different is wrong. LLBs are the, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they are the second fastest way to load a group of VIs off of disk. Fastest 2015. First place is going to be PTLs, right? Okay. Okay. So either way, LLBs are really fast to load a big group of VIs. It's kind of interesting. We have this performance grid in LabVIEW R&D where we try and figure out how to speed up different parts about LabVIEW. You've got some massive 3,000 VI project. We try to load it in our grid and see what things are taking up a lot of time. One of the things that takes up the most time is getting the operating system to find the file on disk and give us back the file on disk. So the more files on disk there are, the more that the OS has to hit and the longer it takes. LLBs, that's a single file on disk. So if you've got a group of related VIs and you want to load them quickly, which we wanted to do with this plugin feature, sticking them in LLB was the way to go. So the affected items input, where you say, I want my plugin to work on strings, or I want my plugin to work on numerics, or whatever. What that allows us to do is Stephen's framework doesn't even look at your plugin if its affected items doesn't apply to what was right-clicked on. So my spell checker that I wrote, if you right-click on a numeric, LabVIEW never loads, looks, does anything with my plugin when you right-click on a numeric because its affected items are strings. So that speeds things up a lot too. We have 2 places where you can put plugins, one in the LabVIEW folder and one in the LabVIEW data folder. Plugins in your LabVIEW folder only work in that LabVIEW. Plugins in your LabVIEW data folder work in whatever LabVIEW your plugin was saved and later versions. So if you have a plugin you've downloaded from the web that's saved in 2015 and you put it in the LabVIEW data folder, then once you install LabVIEW 2016, all of those plugins are also going to work. It's the same strategy I use for quick drop stuff. All right, if you want your plugin to be performant, hopefully you guys noticed during my demos when I was right-clicking doing all that stuff, everything was really fast. I mean, y'all never saw my right-click menus delay. Y'all never saw things kind of wait a long time. And I've got 24 plugins installed, including the shipping ones. Oh, and that doesn't even include the channels ones. So yeah, I've probably got like 36 plugins installed on my system, and the menus are lightning fast. So it's a very performant framework. One of the ways we make it performant, like Alan said, is we have to keep things lightweight, particularly in those builder VIs, because the builder VIs are going to run when you right-click. So if you stick some heavyweight code in the VI that runs when we're building the right-click menu, it's going to take a long time to build the right-click menu. So keep the builder VI as lightweight as possible. We've been burned by the data typing a couple times. So you guys know what application instances are, right? Like you've got My Computer, RT Target, FPGA, VIs run in different application instances. Hopefully you guys are pretty familiar with that sort of how that works. The right-click menu plugin system runs in its own application instance, a private editor application instance in LabVIEW. And there can be problems when you are taking LabVIEW class data and shuffling it across application instance boundaries. So if you've got a plugin and anything in your plugin tries to get a data type of a LabVIEW class, but that LabVIEW class exists in another application instance like wherever the VI was that you're messing with, things can get really screwed up.
Drag sort is a variant.
Yeah.
Crashes on the project provider.
Yes, exactly. So Try not to read the data type property is what I'm saying. Like try, if you can at all avoid it. For example, I had a plugin that dealt with Booleans, and I was reading the data type of the Boolean, I don't know why, to do something over here, and then I realized I could just read the class name of the control and see if that's Boolean instead of having to read the data type. So there's this request deallocation primitive. I had never used it before this particular problem came about, but if you drop that guy in a VI that is reading the data type property, it might solve any problems you might have been having. But try to avoid data type properties if you can at all. Okay, builders stay in memory after they run for the very first time. You can use globals to pass data between builder and itself or execute VI. That's actually what that lookup menu tags and types VI that I did. Remember when I right-clicked on the radio buttons and it popped up that new panel? That panel, I think, was just a global. And that got populated by the right-click guy. And we were able to pass the data that way. If you have a right-click and you wanted to act on a terminal of a tunnel on a loop, you could, in your builder VI, register for, you could in your affected items array have terminal as something that your right-click menu acts upon. And the plugin's going to run every time you right-click on a terminal. Then you can write scripting code to get the owner of the terminal. And if that's a tunnel, get the owner of the tunnel. And if that's a loop, then go do whatever you want to do. That's all code in the builder VI. And remember, we want to keep the builder VI as lightweight as possible. So instead, what you could do is have your affected items array, even though this is only a right-click for terminals, in your affected items array, register for both terminal and structure. Then, when a right-click comes in, see if the terminals array is non-empty and the structures array is non-empty. And if it is, that tells you that that was a right-click on a terminal, and that's a lot less scripting code you have to write. So look for little tricks like that to speed up your builder VI, because you want it to be fast, because you don't want people to get your plugin and then complain that it slows their right-click menus down. Yeah, exactly. And then finally, just a stylistic thing. If your pop-up launches a dialog like the lookup all menu, shortcut menu tags and types says, put a ... at the end of the list. That's what we do with all the built-in C++ right-click menu items in LabVIEW. So get your plugin to do that as well. Any questions? Then go forth and start writing plugins for LabVIEW 2015. Thanks, everybody.
Question for the group. Who has a right-click menu item in their brain right now that they want to write? You do?
Yeah.
I've got one or two.
I'm looking at this in terms of what I call breadcrumbs, because I don't know jack about LabVIEW, but I get lost in all the, there's just so many things, like all the different data types and whatnot. I could put a shortcut, and I don't have to go through and go, is this the U32, or is this the PDQ34, or is 36, or whatnot?
PDQs will get you.
PDQ? They'll get you PDQ. So we're always looking for new topics for this group, and sometimes we kind of scramble. And the thought I had while Darren was presenting was, if we had enough people who were interested to commit to it, maybe next meeting I'll have a right-click menu plugin written. Take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a thought. I mean, it's an idea for us.
Is it okay for this group to do stuff like how this interfaces with actual hardware, like vision systems or robotics or stuff?
Sure.
And we've actually had this quick presentation about a few years ago. We had a series of require someone in the community who's going to sit on that topic. All that we can from within and I was better way. Got those in the past.
Well, this might be the most heavily NI attended planet, but it is a community user group. So we want to hear from them. What?
I was asking Darren why he wouldn't.
Doesn't work for dotted properties.
Okay. So, we are always looking for a presentation from the community, and that will tend to trump unless we've got something screaming that I'd like to inject in the group. I work for NI, but Fab does not. Tab and I founded this group.
Happy?
before I came around. Did you just change it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So now we have a path scalar control called array. There you go. That makes perfect
Are you
sense.
happy?
Perfect.
I don't have been as before.
Well, you can put code in there if it's the default name. You don't.
But it's what Charles wanted, you guys.
Yeah.
Charles.
Is there any way of tracking any state data if you wanted to have like a pull right menu for your change to array, whatever, where you have a checkbox that said persist label and be able to track that?
You want configuration for right clicks is what you want, it sounds like.
So, easy way to do that is, read from, in your builder GUI, read from the content file.
Yeah, you can.
And there's
Yeah.
guides for doing exactly that.
Okay.
Most of you are familiar with the config file GIs that are in palette. Ignore those. There's
Yeah.
one of the LabVIEW INI file that's in the resource.
Hidden gem. Another Darren presentation.
Yep, they're right here.
Okay, cool.
So.
Yeah, because I was thinking that that's definitely a personal preference thing, but
What do you want?
For your palettes.
exactly.
Right here, there.
All right. So, thanks to our presenters. Thanks, guys, for coming down and taking your evening. Thank you all for coming out.
Please sign in before you leave if you haven't already.
Thanks for that reminder. Thanks again to NI for sponsoring the food, and Assistclear for the generous use of their Join Me account. If you have suggestions for topics you would like to present or would like to see presented, please post to our forum, the NI forums. We'd love to get a list of topics going and a list of presenters we're going to present. We're always looking for presenters. So again, thank you all for coming out. There's more food in the back still. Please take some. We're just going to throw it out if you don't. Hey, you want this? I'm just going to throw it away. And thank you all for coming, and safe travels home. And with that,
Thanks, Alan.